The twin suns of Thermon 7 blazed mercilessly overhead, casting harsh shadows across the ramshackle marketplace that sprawled like a metallic tumor across the desert planet's surface. Dust devils danced between the corrugated metal stalls, carrying the mingled scents of exotic spices, ozone from jury-rigged electronics, and the unmistakable musk of a dozen different alien species conducting their daily commerce. The black market never slept, never rested, and certainly never showed mercy to those who couldn't keep up with its relentless pace. Ray Dorman, however, had mastered the art of avoiding that pace entirely. Sprawled beneath the dubious shelter of a patched tarp, stretched between two rust-eaten support beams, he dozed contentedly in yesterday's clothes, a faded yellow jacket that had seen better decades and boots that had walked more miles than most starships had traveled parsecs. A salvager by trade and a philosopher of indolence by choice, Ray had elevated afternoon naps to an art form. His philosophy was simple. Why chase after dropped cargo when gravity would eventually bring everything down to ground level anyway? The sound of purposeful footsteps crunching across the gritty sand didn't disturb his slumber. Neither did the shadow that fell across his face, momentarily blocking the brutal heat. It wasn't until a firm hand seized the collar of his yellow jacket and hauled him upright that Ray's peaceful afternoon came to an abrupt end. "Wake up, salvager," commanded a voice with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed immediately. "I require your services." Ray's bleary eyes focused slowly on his uninvited visitor. Standing before him was a figure that commanded attention, even in a marketplace full of exotic beings. She was unmistakably humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin held a rich purple hue that seemed to shimmer slightly in the harsh light, and her bearing radiated the kind of disciplined confidence that only came from years of federal training. Her clothing was practical, but well-made, a fitted coat and deep blue utility belts that actually held useful equipment, rather than mere decoration, and boots that looked like they could kick through a bulkhead if necessary. Lady Ray managed running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't know who you think I am, but Ray Dorman, freelance salvager known for your unique ability to recover items that others consider irretrievably lost." She released his jacket, but didn't step back, keeping him pinned in place with her intense stare. "You're going to guide me through the underground markets." Ray tried to take a step backward, but his makeshift shelter left little room for retreat. "Look, Miss!" Agent Lixa Zayer, Nebula Federation Intelligence. She reached into her coat and produced a small, but official-looking badge that gleamed with embedded authentication crystals. "And this isn't a request." Ray's natural instinct was to be helpful, or at least appear helpful, while finding ways to avoid actual work. He scrambled to his feet and extended his hand in the universal human gesture of greeting. "Well, Agent Zayer, it's a pleasure to—" Lixa's eyes widened in what could only be described as horror. She stared at his outstretched hand, as if he'd just brandished a weapon. "Human," she exclaimed, her voice carrying a mix of outrage and disbelief. "You're supposed to greet my melons, not my hand. It's custom." Ray froze his hand, still extended, his brain struggling to process what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry, you're what now?" "My melons," Lixa gestured emphatically toward her chest, where Ray now noticed two rounded protrusions that he'd initially assumed were some sort of armor plating or equipment. In civilized society, one acknowledges another's melons before attempting any other form of contact. It's basic interspecies diplomacy. "Oh," Ray said slowly, his hand still hovering in midair. "I didn't know. Where I come from, we usually shake hands or—" "Well, you're not where you come from anymore," Lixa interrupted, her purple skin darkening slightly, with what Ray assumed was irritation. "You're on Thermon 7 in a galactic crossroads marketplace, dealing with beings from 100 different worlds. The melon greeting is universal protocol." Ray lowered his hand awkwardly. "Right, so I should— what exactly touch your melons?" "Not touch." Lixa looked positively scandalized now. "Acknowledge with respect. There's a proper way to do it." She demonstrated by placing her hands near her chest in a graceful gesture that somehow managed to be both formal and elegant. You hold your hands like this, make eye contact, and give a slight bow. It shows you recognize my melons and honor their significance. Ray attempted to mimic the gesture, feeling thoroughly ridiculous. His movement was clumsy and uncertain, nothing like Lixa's fluid demonstration. Like this. Lixa winced. That's an attempt. We'll work on it. Right now, I need you to take me to the deeper markets. There are certain items of galactic significance that have found their way into less legitimate channels, and I have reason to believe they're being traded here. Ray glanced around the bustling marketplace, already calculating the safest routes to the underground levels. What kind of items are we talking about? Because if this is about those crystalline artifacts from the Rigel system, I should warn you that it's not your concern what we're looking for. Lixa cut him off. Your concern is getting me there safely and discreetly, and learning proper greeting etiquette along the way. As if summoned by their conversation about discretion, a commotion erupted near the main thoroughfare. A group of figures in flowing red robes had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, and were now moving through the crowd with purposeful determination. The other market denizens instinctively gave them wide-berth conversations, dropping to nervous whispers. The Eternal Flame Consortium, Ray muttered, suddenly feeling much more alert. That's not good. Lixa followed his gaze, her hand instinctively moving to rest on something at her belt. What are they? Religious cult. Very serious about their beliefs, very unfriendly to outsiders, and very interested in certain types of ancient artifacts. Ray was already gathering his meager possessions, shoving tools and salvaged components into a worn satchel. If they're here, it means they're looking for something specific, something they consider sacred. One of the robed figures suddenly stopped and turned in their direction. Even with the distance and the hood obscuring the being's features, Ray could feel the weight of their attention like a physical force. Time to go, he said urgently, grabbing Lixa's arm. The underground markets have multiple access points. We can reach them through the old maintenance tunnels if we move now. Lixa shook off his grip, but followed as he led her away from their makeshift camp. I take it these consortium members wouldn't approve of federal agents investigating their activities. They wouldn't approve of anyone investigating anything, Ray replied, ducking between two merchant stalls. They guard their secrets zealously, and their definition of blasphemy is pretty broad. Includes things like asking questions, being curious, and breathing in the vicinity of their sacred objects. They moved quickly through the labyrinthine passages between stalls, Ray's knowledge of the marketplace's layout serving them well. He led Lixa down a narrow alley where the afternoon shadows provided some cover from the pursuing cultists. Here, Ray said, dropping to his knees beside what appeared to be a decorative grating. With practiced movements, he manipulated a hidden latch, and the grating swung open to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. The old ventilation system connects to the service tunnels. From there, we can reach the underground markets without going through the main entrances. Lixa peered into the opening dubiously. How do you know about this? Let's just say I've had occasion to leave the surface quickly before. Ray swung himself onto the ladder. After you, Agent. Actually, Lixa said, climbing down after him, this would be a perfect opportunity to practice proper melon acknowledgement. In many cultures, it's customary to honor someone's melons before entering confined spaces together. Ray paused on the ladder, looking up at her incredulously. We're being chased by religious fanatics, and you want to discuss greeting etiquette. Proper protocol is always important, Lixa replied with absolute seriousness. Especially in stressful situations. It shows respect and builds trust. Fine, Ray sighed, attempting the gesture again while hanging one-handed from the ladder. I acknowledge your melons. With respect. Can we please keep moving now? Better, Lixa admitted, as they descended into the underground tunnels. But you need to put more feeling into it. The melon greeting isn't just a formality. It's a recognition of personhood, of dignity, of the unique beauty each individual possesses. The tunnels were a maze of pipes, cables, and forgotten passages that honeycombed beneath Thermin 7's surface installations. Emergency lighting strips provided just enough illumination to navigate by casting everything in an eerie blue-green glow. The air was stale and carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere mixed with the accumulated sense of decades of alien occupation. "Tell me about these melons," Ray said as they made their way through the passages. "Is it a biological thing, cultural? I've dealt with dozens of species, but I've never encountered this particular custom." Lixa moved with surprising grace through the cramped tunnels, her federal training evident in how she automatically checked corners and listened for sounds of pursuit. It varies by species, but the fundamental principle remains the same. The melons represent openness, vulnerability, and trust. By acknowledging them properly, you're saying you see the other person as a complete being worthy of respect. And what happens if you don't do it right? Depends on the species and the situation. Some consider it a minor breach of etiquette. Others— She paused at an intersection checking the corridor markers. Others might view it as a serious insult or even an act of aggression. Ray filed that information away as they navigated deeper into the tunnel system. The underground markets of Thermin 7 weren't marked on any official maps, but they'd been thriving for decades in the spaces between legitimate commerce and outright crime. It was where you went to find things that couldn't be found elsewhere, either because they were rare, forbidden, or didn't technically exist according to various governing bodies. There, Ray pointed to a section of wall that looked identical to every other section they'd passed. "This connects to sublevel C. The markets should be just beyond." He pressed his palm against what appeared to be solid wall, and a section slid away silently, revealing a bustling corridor beyond. The contrast was immediate and overwhelming. Where the tunnels had been quiet and dim, the underground markets exploded with noise, light, and activity. Alien voices in dozens of languages created a constant buzz of negotiation and commerce. Holographic displays advertised everything from memory-enhancing neural implants to bottles of concentrated starlight. The air was thick with the sense of exotic foods, unfamiliar technologies, and the ozone smell of energy weapons being test-fired in merchant booths. "Stay close," Ray warned, leading Lixa into the crowd. "And whatever you do, don't stare at the merchandise too long. Some of these dealers take prolonged interest as a sign you're either buying or stealing." They made their way through the market's Ray's trained eye, automatically cataloging the various goods on display. There were artifacts that glowed, with their own inner light weapons that looked more like works of art than instruments of war, and containers whose contents were probably best left unexplored. "There," Lixa pointed toward a stall draped in shimmering fabrics. "That merchant has Federation markings on some of his inventory. Those shouldn't be here." Ray squinted in the direction she indicated. The merchant was a tall, thin being, with elongated limbs and skin that shifted between different shades of green, depending on the angle of the light. His stall was indeed filled with an eclectic mix of items, some of which bore the distinctive coating used by Federation science vessels. "That's Zortek," Ray said. "He specializes in recovered scientific equipment. Very knowledgeable about ancient cultures and their religious practices. If anyone would know about artifacts the consortium might be interested in, it would be him." They approached the stall, weaving through the crowd of shoppers and browsers. As they drew closer, Ray noticed Lixa taking a deep breath and adjusting her posture. "Greetings, honored Zortek," she said, approaching the merchant. To Ray's surprise, she immediately performed the melon, greeting her movements, fluid and respectful. Zortek's large, multifaceted eyes brightened, and he responded with his own version of the gesture, a complex movement that involved all four of his arms and a slight membrane flare along his neck. "Ah, Agent Zayer, your melons are most excellently presented today. It's always a pleasure to encounter someone who observes proper protocol." Ray watched this exchange with growing fascination. It was like seeing a completely different language being spoken through gestures and movements he was only beginning to understand. I seek information about certain artifacts that may have passed through your establishment, Lixa continued. Items of significant archaeological and cultural value. Zortek's expression became more guarded. Straight to business. I appreciate directness, though. I must point out that your companion has yet to properly acknowledge your melons. In mixed company, proper etiquette requires all parties to participate. All eyes turned to Ray, who felt his face growing warm. Right, of course. He attempted the gesture again this time, trying to infuse it with more of the respect and dignity Lixa had talked about. It still felt awkward, but he thought he detected a slight improvement in execution. Somewhat better, Zortek admitted. Though you might benefit from understanding the deeper significance of what you're doing. The melon greeting isn't just about the physical gesture. It's about recognizing the essence of the being before you. Could you teach him? Lixa asked. It would be beneficial for our current endeavor. Zortek considered this, his eyes shifting through several color patterns. I could, but such teaching requires time and the proper setting. However, I happen to know someone who specializes in such cultural education. Old Nyx over in the meditation district. She's an eternal observer, has studied thousands of species and their greeting customs. The meditation district, Ray asked. 3 levels down past the food courts and the illegal gambling dens. Zortek gestured with 2 of his arms. But be warned, if the Eternal Flame Consortium is active today, Nyx's district might not be the safest place to visit. They consider her practices heretical. As if summoned by his words, a disturbance erupted in the far end of the market. Shouts echoed off the stone walls, and the crowd began to mill nervously. Ray caught sight of red robes moving purposefully through the masses, the cultists clearly having found their way into the underground. Time to move, Lixa said grimly. Zortek, thank you for the information. Wait, the merchant called after them. You'll want to practice the greeting with sincerity before you see Nyx. She can sense falseness from across a room, and she doesn't suffer insincere melons gladly. Ray and Lixa hurried toward the exit to the lower levels, but the consortium members were moving to block the main passages. Ray grabbed Lixa's arm and pulled her toward a service corridor marked with maintenance symbols. This way, he hissed. There's a cargo lift that goes directly to the lower levels. It's not supposed to be used by civilians, but you've used it before, Lixa finished. I'm starting to see a pattern in my life choices, Ray admitted, as they slipped into the corridor. The cargo lift was a massive platform designed to transport heavy equipment between levels. It moved slowly and made disturbing grinding noises, but it descended steadily into the deeper parts of the underground complex. As they dropped below the market level, the sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by a different kind of atmosphere entirely. The meditation district was unlike anything Ray had expected. Instead of the harsh, manufactured feel of the upper levels, this area had been carved directly into the living rock of the planet. Soft, bioluminescent panels provided gentle lighting, and the air carried hints of incense and growing things. Small gardens had been cultivated in alcoves, and water trickled down channeled stone walls in soothing patterns. It's beautiful, Lixa breathed, her professional reserve dropping for a moment. Yeah, Ray agreed, though he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Now, where do we find this Nyx person? They didn't have to search long. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves facing an open courtyard where a figure sat in meditation on a raised platform. Nyx was clearly of an ancient species. Her skin had a translucent quality that revealed complex patterns of light flowing beneath the surface, and her eyes held the depth of someone who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Without opening her eyes, she spoke. Agent Lixa Zayer of Nebula Federation Intelligence, and Ray Dorman Salvager, and recent student of Melon Greeting Protocols. You seek the deep understanding. Lixa stepped forward and performed the Melon Greeting with careful precision. Honored Nyx, we require guidance in matters of cultural significance. Nyx's eyes opened, revealing irises that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Your melons speak of urgency and hidden purpose. Your companions speak of confusion and resistance to change. She looked directly at Ray. Show me what you've learned. Ray performed the gesture again, putting effort into making it as respectful as possible. Nix watched him with unwavering attention, then nodded slowly. You perform the movements correctly, but you don't understand the meaning. Come sit. Let me show you what you're truly doing when you acknowledge another's melons. She gestured for them to join her on the platform. Ray sat cross-legged, feeling self-conscious, while Lixa maintained a more formal posture beside him. The melon greeting. Nix, began her voice, carrying an almost hypnotic quality, is not about the physical form. Different species have different interpretations of what constitutes melons, but the essence remains the same. Watch. She demonstrated the gesture, and as she did, Ray noticed something extraordinary. The patterns of light beneath her skin brightened and flowed more rapidly, creating a display that was both beautiful and somehow deeply personal. For my species, the melons are here. She indicated points along her torso, where the light patterns were brightest. They represent the core of our being, the place where thought, emotion, and spirit converge. To acknowledge them is to see another as a complete entity, not merely a body or a mind, but a living constellation of experiences and potential. And for species like Agent Zaire, Ray asked, genuinely curious now. For my people, Lixa said, the melons represent our connection to the cosmos. They're sensitive to gravitational fields, emotional resonance, even quantum fluctuations. Acknowledging them shows you recognize our ability to perceive beyond the merely physical. And for humans, Ray asked. Nick smiled. Humans have melons too, though you've forgotten how to see them. They manifest in your capacity for empathy, your ability to create meaning from chaos, your inexplicable drive to connect with beings vastly different from yourselves. Ray attempted the gesture again this time, thinking not just about the movement but about what Lixa had told him of her people, about recognizing her as a complete being with capabilities beyond his understanding. Better, Nix approved. You're beginning to understand, but understanding alone isn't enough. You must feel the significance, let it resonate through you. She stood gracefully. However, I sense our time here grows short. The Eternal Flame Consortium approaches, and they do not appreciate the kind of ecumenical melon greeting we teach here. As if on cue, the sounds of pursuit echoed through the corridors leading to the meditation district. Ray could hear the harsh voices of the cultists, their chants growing closer. There's another way out, Nick said, moving toward what appeared to be a solid wall. Through the old temple complex, but be warned that path will take you into the heart of what the consortium seeks to protect. She pressed her hand against the wall, and a hidden passage opened. Beyond lay a corridor carved with ancient symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Thank you, Lixa said, performing the melon greeting one final time. Wait, Ray said urgently. Before we go, is there something special about the greeting? Something that could provide protection or, I don't know, power? Nix's smile became enigmatic. All sincere communication has power, young salvager. But some locations, some artifacts respond more strongly to genuine displays of respect and understanding. You may find this knowledge useful where you're going. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, and Ray could now hear the distinctive humming of energy weapons being powered up. He and Lixa hurried into the passage, the hidden door sealing behind them, just as armed figures burst into the meditation chamber. The corridor ahead was long and straight, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. The symbols on the walls were clearly very old, representing civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humans had reached the stars. Some of the markings seemed to pulse faintly with their own inner light. This place feels ancient, Lixa murmured, running her fingers along the carved walls. These symbols, I've seen similar ones in Federation archaeological reports. They're pre-contact, possibly older than recorded galactic history. Great, Ray muttered. We're fleeing through a museum exhibit. That never ends badly. They reached the end of the corridor, which opened into a vast chamber that took Ray's breath away. The space was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. In the center stood a structure that could only be described as a temple, though it was unlike any religious architecture Ray had seen. It was composed of interlocking geometric forms that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, creating optical illusions that made his eyes water when he tried to focus on the details. But what truly caught his attention was the ship. It was sleek and elegant, clearly of Federation design, but modified with technologies Ray didn't recognize. The vessel sat on a landing platform that had been seamlessly integrated into the temple's architecture, as if the two had been built as a single entity. "The Leviathan," Lixa breathed. "It's really here." "You knew about this ship." "It's been missing for 6 months. The crew was investigating ancient artifacts that had suddenly become active across multiple systems. Then they vanished." She approached the ship cautiously. "If they're here, if they found what they were looking for." The sound of pursuit echoed through the corridor behind them. The consortium had broken through Nyx's defenses and was closing in rapidly. Decisions, Ray said. "Hide in an ancient temple that's probably booby-trapped, or board a mysterious Federation ship that may or may not still have its crew aboard." The ship, Lixa, decided without hesitation. Whatever they found, it's important enough that the consortium is willing to kill for it. They ran toward the Leviathan, the ship's boarding ramp, lowering as they approached. Ray wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a very bad one. They rushed up the ramp and into the ship's interior, just as the first of the red-robed figures emerged into the temple chamber. The ship's interior was a blend of Federation standard design and something else entirely. The walls were lined with displays showing complex patterns that seemed to shift and change, and the air hummed with barely contained energy. They moved quickly through the corridors, following signs toward the bridge. "Wait!" Lixa stopped, suddenly holding up a hand. "Do you hear that?" Ray listened. Beneath the ship's normal operational sounds was something else, a low, rhythmic pulsing that seemed almost organic. "That doesn't sound mechanical." They found the source in the ship's main cargo bay. In the center of the space, suspended in a containment field, was an artifact unlike anything Ray had ever seen. It was roughly spherical, but seemed to shift between different geometric configurations as they watched. The object pulsed with the same rhythm they'd been hearing, and each pulse sent waves of energy through the ship's systems. "By the cosmic depths," Lixa whispered. "It's a resonance core." "Oh, what now?" "Pre-contact technology, possibly from the same civilization that built these temples. They're incredibly rare, incredibly powerful, and according to the research I've seen, they're supposed to respond to specific types of interaction." Ray studied the artifact, noting the way it seemed to react to their presence. "What kind of interaction?" "Ritualistic communication, formal protocols, the kind of ancient diplomatic gestures that have been preserved in greeting customs across dozens of species." Lixa turned to look at him meaningfully. "Like the melon greeting." "You've got to be kidding me." The research suggested that these cores were originally diplomatic tools designed to facilitate communication between vastly different species. They respond to displays of genuine respect and understanding. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside interrupted their conversation. The consortium had boarded the ship and was making its way toward the cargo bay. Ray could hear their chanted prayers growing louder as they approached. "Ideas would be good right about now," Ray said urgently. Lixa moved closer to the containment field. "If the theories are correct, a properly performed greeting might activate the core's protective protocols. But it has to be absolutely sincere, completely respectful. And if you're wrong, then we probably die in a very spectacular fashion." The cargo bay doors slid open, and a dozen figures in red robes poured into the space. Their leader, a tall being with pale, mottled skin and eyes that glowed with fanatical fervor, pointed a long-barreled energy weapon at them. "Step away from the sacred resonance," the leader commanded. "You have defiled this holy place with your presence." "Actually," Ray said, surprised by his own calm. "I think we're about to show it the proper respect." He turned to face the artifact, and for the first time since Lixa had grabbed him from his afternoon nap, performed the melon greeting with complete sincerity. He thought about Nix's words about recognizing the complete being before him. In this case, an ancient intelligence created by a long-dead civilization. He thought about respect, dignity, and the desire for genuine communication across the vast gulfs that separated different forms of life. The artifact's pulsing slowed, then deepened, each beat sending stronger waves of energy through the ship. The patterns on its surface became more complex, more beautiful, and Ray found himself yawning, a completely involuntary response that he didn't understand until the artifact suddenly blazed with light. The energy discharge wasn't harmful, but it was overwhelming. Every person in the cargo bay was bathed in cascading waves of light that seemed to carry information directly into their minds. Ray saw flashes of ancient civilizations, star-spanning empires built on principles of mutual respect and understanding. He saw the purpose of the resonance cores, not weapons, but tools of diplomacy, designed to break down barriers between species and create genuine connections. When the light faded, the consortium members were standing in stunned silence. Their weapons had powered down, their leader staring at the artifact with something approaching awe instead of fanatical possession. It spoke to us," the leader whispered. "The sacred resonance. It shared its true purpose." One of the other cultists, removing his hood to reveal a scarred reptilian face, bowed deeply toward Ray and Lixa. "Forgive us. We believed the cores were meant to be hoarded, protected from outsiders. We didn't understand that they were meant to be shared to bring understanding between all beings." Lixa stepped forward, performing the melon greeting toward the former consortium leader. "Your dedication to protecting ancient wisdom is admirable. Perhaps we can work together to ensure these artifacts serve their intended purpose." The leader hesitated, then returned the greeting with surprising grace. "You honor our commitment. Yes, perhaps cooperation is the path forward." Ray found himself grinning despite everything. "So what you're saying is all we had to do was ask nicely." "In a manner of speaking," Lixa replied. "Though I think your yawn was what activated the core's deeper protocols. Apparently yawning is a recognized stress relief gesture across multiple species, a sign of forced calm in the face of overwhelming situations." "Great, I saved the day by being tired." Over the next several hours, they worked with the former consortium members to understand the true purpose of the resonance cores. The ship's missing crew was found in various parts of the temple complex, where they'd been studying other artifacts. It turned out they hadn't been captured or killed. They'd been so fascinated by their discoveries that they'd simply forgotten to report in. Dr. Sarah Chen, the expedition's lead archaeologist, was particularly excited by what they'd learned. "These cores aren't just communication devices," she explained, as they gathered in the Leviathan's main briefing room. "They're teaching tools designed to help species recognize commonalities across their differences. The greeting protocols aren't arbitrary. They're carefully designed to encourage empathy and understanding." "So the melon greeting really is universal?" Ray asked. "In principle," Dr. Chen replied. "Different species express it differently, but the core concept, acknowledging the essential personhood of another being, seems to be fundamental to sapient life throughout the galaxy." Agent Lixa sat back in her chair, looking more relaxed than Ray had seen her since their first meeting. "This will change everything. If we can use these cores to improve diplomatic relations between species—" "Big if," Ray interrupted. "Some people aren't interested in understanding others. They prefer conflict to connection." "True," Lixa admitted. "But at least now we have tools to facilitate understanding for those who want it." As the day wound toward evening, the various parties began making plans for departing Thermin 7. The Leviathan's crew would continue their research now, with the cooperation of the former consortium members. The artifacts would be studied in controlled conditions, with representatives from multiple species involved in the process. Ray found himself standing on the ship's observation deck, looking out at the ancient temple. Lixa joined him, carrying 2 cups of something that steamed in the recycled air. "Tea," she said, offering him one of the cups. "Or the closest equivalent the ship's dispensers can manage." "Thanks." Ray took a sip, finding it surprisingly palatable. "So what happens now?" "You've got your artifacts. The consortium has been converted to the cause of galactic understanding, and I've learned to properly acknowledge people's melons. Mission accomplished." "Actually," Lixa said, "I've been thinking. The Federation could use someone with your particular skills. Someone who knows how to navigate the gray areas between legal and illegal, who understands the underground markets." "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. There are other lost artifacts out there, other mysteries to solve. And it seems like you and I work well together despite our different approaches to, well, everything." Ray considered this, watching, as the temple's ancient lights began to glow more brightly in the gathering dusk. "I have to ask, is proper melon greeting going to be a regular part of this partnership?" Lixa smiled the first time he'd seen her express genuine mirth. "It's a big galaxy, Ray, full of beings with different customs, different ways of expressing respect and building connections. If we're going to work together, we need to be prepared for all of them." "Fair enough." Ray raised his cup in a mock toast. "To new partnerships and properly acknowledged melons." "To understanding across the vast reaches of space," Lixa replied, clinking her cup against his. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first of Thermon 7's triple moons began to rise over the desert landscape. In the distance, the marketplace continued its endless dance of commerce and culture beings from dozens of worlds coming together to trade, negotiate, and occasionally learn from one another. Ray thought about his afternoon nap, which seemed like days ago now, instead of mere hours. He'd started the day as a simple salvager, with no ambitions beyond avoiding work and staying comfortable. Now he was part of a galactic archaeological expedition, had learned the basics of interspecies diplomacy, and had accidentally activated an ancient artifact through the power of respectful yawning. "You know," he said finally, "this job is going to be a lot more work than I usually prefer." "But more interesting," Lixa suggested. Ray grinned. "Definitely more interesting. Though I still think we should establish some ground rules about greeting protocols. I'm all for cultural sensitivity, but some species have really complicated customs, and I've got a terrible memory for details." "We'll practice," Lixa assured him. "And if you forget, just remember the core principle: genuine respect and recognition of personhood. Most species can sense sincerity even if you get the specific gestures wrong." "Noted." Ray took another sip of tea, then performed the melon greeting one more time for practice. Lixa returned the gesture, and he was pleased to note that it felt much more natural now, less like an awkward formality, and more like a genuine expression of respect. "Better?" he asked. "Much better. Though you might want to work on the timing a bit. The pause between the hand positioning and the bow is supposed to be slightly longer. It gives the other person time to prepare their response." "Right. Timing. Got it." Ray shook his head with amusement. "You realize I went from 0 to fairly competent at this in one day, right? That's either a testament to your teaching skills or evidence that I'm not as culturally hopeless as I thought." "Probably both," Lixa replied diplomatically. As the evening progressed, they watched shuttles and transport vessels departing from the marketplace, carrying their passengers to destinations across the galaxy. The temple complex below them glowed with a soft, steady light, the resonance core having settled into a peaceful dormancy after its dramatic activation. "So," Ray said as they prepared to leave the observation deck, "our next assignment, any chance it'll involve someplace with better climate control? Because while I appreciate the whole ancient mystery in a desert temple aesthetic, I'm more of a temperate climate kind of guy." "We'll see what comes up," Lixa replied. "Though I should warn you, archaeological sites tend to be in remote locations. Ancient civilizations had a talent for building their most important sites in the most inconvenient places." "Of course they did," Ray sighed dramatically. Well, at least we've established that I can handle one ancient civilization's customs. How many more could there be? Lixa's smile suggested that he might be underestimating the size and complexity of the galaxy. Ray, I think you're about to get a much broader education in xenoarchaeology and interspecies relations than you ever imagined. Lucky me, Ray said, though he couldn't entirely hide the excitement in his voice. Despite himself, he was looking forward to the challenges ahead. As they made their way back into the ship, Ray reflected on how much had changed in a single day. He'd learned about respect, about the importance of understanding different cultures, and about the power of genuine communication to bridge even the most unlikely gaps between beings. He'd also learned that yawning at just the right moment could save the day, though he suspected that particular skill might not come up again anytime soon. The Leviathan's engines hummed to life as the ship prepared for departure. Ray settled into the passenger cabin that had been assigned to him, looking out through the porthole at the receding temple complex. Somewhere in the darkness, Nyx was probably still teaching meditation and proper greeting techniques to anyone willing to learn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cultures to navigate, and presumably new greeting customs to master. But for now, Ray was content to rest, knowing that he'd found something he hadn't even realized. He was looking for a purpose that went beyond mere survival, and a partner who valued both competence and cultural sensitivity. As the ship lifted off into the star-filled night, Ray gave one last perfect melon greeting to his reflection in the porthole window, then smiled and settled in for the journey ahead. After all, the galaxy was vast, full of wonders and mysteries, and somewhere out there were artifacts waiting to be discovered by a team that understood the true value of showing proper respect to both ancient intelligences and contemporary beings with well-presented melons. And if that wasn't worth losing a few afternoon naps over, Ray thought sleepily, then nothing was.